Good morning. I'm David Skeel, the chairman of the Financial Oversight and Management Board for Puerto Rico. I would like to welcome everyone joining us today for the Oversight Board's second public meeting of 2024 and our 44th public meeting overall, which we'll be holding on Zoom today. To kick things off, I'd like to start with a roll call to formally determine that we have a quorum present, starting with Dr. Andrew Biggs.
I am present.
Thank you, Andrew. Judge Arthur Gonzalez. I think I see his number, but well, I'll keep going, and I think he is on, but hopefully we can connect him. Mr. John Nixon.
Present.
Thank you, John. Dr. Betty Rosa.
Presente. Buenos días. Present.
Thank you, Betty. Mr. Juan Sabater.
Yes, present as well.
Thank you, Juan. I'm here, and our ex officio member, the governor of Puerto Rico, Pedro Pierluisi.
Good morning, present.
Thank you, Governor. So we have a meeting, so we have a quorum, and we can have a meeting. We can call the meeting to order. Before we jump into the meeting, I'd like to formally introduce and welcome our newest board member, Mr. Juan Sabater, to his first public meeting of the board. As I mentioned at our last public meeting in February, we're thrilled that Juan is joining us. He's already joined us, but this is the first time publicly. We're very excited about his appointment to the board, and we're really looking forward to working with you, Juan, on our core mission. Juan has a very impressive background, and he has an enormous amount of experience in precisely the areas that are essential for Puerto Rico's future. Juan, I understand that you would like to say a few words by way of introduction.
Thank you very much, Chairman Skeel. And first of all, I want to share with everyone how honored and privileged I am to be with all of you today and to be with the governor. It is really a great, great day for me to be able to serve in this way. I also would like to take a moment to thank President Biden for nominating me to the Oversight Board. He was very generous by providing this opportunity, and he knows that I'm here because I want to help Puerto Rico recover and prosper. I know a lot of work has been done by this committee and by this group for a period of time. I also know there is a lot of work ahead, and I want to be part of the discussions that promote economic growth and opportunity for all of the people of Puerto Rico. These are areas where I have spent a lifetime working and doing. I have also spent time investing in companies that demonstrate the potential for outside growth. In a perfect world, we would see more of that in Puerto Rico and see our economy thrive, and I look forward to working with the board to achieve those goals. I was born in San Juan, and I lived on the island till I was 13 years old, and my ties to the island remain very strong. I have many relatives who live in the island. I enjoy spending time in the island, and candidly, it is a very important part of my identity. I also am privileged to have had a part of my education paid by the United States Army. I attended Princeton University, where I received a degree, Stanford Law School, where I received a degree, and also was a visiting student at Oxford University. Today, I'm a partner at Valor Equity Partners, which is a growth-focused private equity firm that focuses specifically on helping entrepreneurially driven businesses grow. We have had the opportunity to support many great entrepreneurs in the United States, and that experience gives me insights into what are the attributes that define success. I also am an entrepreneur. Before Valor, with a friend, I joined and we built a company together that is now a large company in the technology, engagement, and affinity space. And I continue to be active in the company. On the island, I'm on the board of Endeavor Puerto Rico, an organization, again, that believes that entrepreneurs transform economies and that entrepreneurial activity, when unleashed, can provide for great futures. This is an opportunity I would like to see for all Puerto Ricans as we move forward to the benefit of all Puerto Ricans. I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues on the Oversight Board, with members of the Puerto Rico government, to strengthen the foundations of the island and to increase its entrepreneurial spirit. I believe greatly in the potential of the island and its people. With that, thank you very much, Chairman Skeel. I'll turn it to you.
Thank you very much, Juan. And again, welcome. We're thrilled to have you with us. As usual, I'd like to ask our General Counsel, Mr. Jaime El Khoury, if he would be willing to act as the secretary or the secretary for this meeting. Jaime?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Skeel.
Thank you very much, Jaime. I'd like to thank everybody who's watching the live stream of this meeting via the Oversight Board's website, www.oversightboard.pr.gov. The audio of the meeting is available as usual in English, and as usual, there's also a simultaneous Spanish translation. The meeting is also being translated into sign language. You log into the English language website, the audio will be in English. If you log into the Spanish website, you'll hear the simultaneous Spanish translation. As usual, we'll be handling any questions and or comments from our online participants through a form that's available on our website. The form is on the live stream page. And if you want to ask a question or make a comment, put your name and add any question or comment that you have to that form. We'll take questions or comments until 15 minutes before the end of the meeting, and we'll provide answers to those questions and replies to the comments promptly on our website. We'll also be giving an opportunity for live comments, I believe, towards the end of the meeting. We have a full agenda for today. I'll just quickly run through it. First, we'll approve minutes. Second, we have one administrative matter. Third, we'll have an update from the executive director. Fourth, we will certify the 2024 Commonwealth Fiscal Plan. Fifth, we will certify or plan to certify the 2024 PRIDCO Fiscal Plan. Sixth, we plan to certify the 2024 COFINA Fiscal Plan. Seventh, we will submit or plan to submit the fiscal year 2025 Commonwealth budget to the governor and to the legislature. Eighth, we'll have some remarks from the governor. And then finally, we'll have public commentary, any other matters, and then we'll adjourn the meeting. So jumping right into it, the first order of business is to approve the minutes from our last public meeting, which we held on February 28th. Those meetings are attached to the meeting materials as Appendix A. We also need to approve the minutes from a series of executive sessions that we have held since that public meeting. Those executive sessions were held on March 1, March 15, March 21, March 27, April 5, April 19, May 10, May 17, and May 24th, 2024. They're attached, the executive sessions, to the meeting materials as Appendix B. Are there any questions about the minutes? Do I have a motion to approve them?
I can do it. Mr. Chair, I'd like to move to approve the minutes of the Oversight Board's public meetings held on February 28th, 2024, which are attached as Appendix A, and the minutes of the executive sessions held on March 1st, March 15th, March 21st, March 27th, April 5th, April 19th, May 10, May 17th, and May 24, 2024, which are attached as Appendix B in the form presented to the meeting.
Thank you, Andrew. Do we have a second?
Mr. Chairman, it's Juan Sabater. I second.
Thank you, Juan. So I will, in just a minute, take a voice vote. The way I'll do the voice vote is I'll first ask for everybody who is in favor to say yes. I will then ask for any no votes, and then finally I will ask for any abstentions. So would all in favor please say yes?
Yes.
Yes. I think we have at least 4 there. Any no votes? Any abstentions? So that passes. The other preliminary matter we have is a housekeeping motion, which relates to executive sessions and actions by unanimous written consent. And typically, Andrew gives this motion as well. Andrew, can you do this motion?
This may be my 44th time doing this.
I don't know what I'm going to do if you say no.
That's right.
But
between the adjournment to this meeting and the opening of the Oversight Board's next public meeting, the Oversight Board may consider in executive session any and all matters it is authorized to consider under PROMESA, including first, any certification determinations authorized by PROMESA, including certification determinations under Section 206 of PROMESA. Second, any submissions or authorizations authorized by PROMESA. And third, any filings authorized under Title III of PROMESA, in each case that are set forth as part of the vote to convene such executive session. The Oversight Board may also act by unanimous written consent between meetings in accordance with its bylaws, with such consent to include consent by electronic transmission.
Thank you, Andrew. Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Juan. Would all in favor please say yes?
Yes.
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 Any opposed, say no. Any abstentions? That motion passes as well. So we can now turn to the substance of the meeting. And for that, I'll open the floor to our Executive Director, Robert Mujica, who will be giving an overview of the Oversight Board's work since our last public meeting back in February. Robert, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Skeel, board members, and Governor. Since the last public board meeting in February, the Oversight Board has been working on the annual revision of the fiscal plans, particularly the fiscal plan for Puerto Rico, and together with the government on the budget for the Commonwealth and the instrumentalities covered under PROMESA. Today, we are presenting the fiscal plan for Puerto Rico for your review and certification and your approval to submit the Commonwealth budget to the Legislative Assembly. The taxpayers of Puerto Rico, meanwhile, are receiving or have received a one-time tax rebate in recent weeks based on an agreement between the governor, the legislature, and the Oversight Board. Late last year, we raised concerns about the affordability of a broader permanent tax cut that was passed by the legislature due to the out-year impact and economic uncertainties. But today, I'd like to thank the governor and the legislative leadership for their cooperation to reach an agreement that benefits 150,000 working families who rightly receive their share of Puerto Rico's current economic upswing in a financially responsible way that is without burdening Puerto Rico's finances in the future. Together, the government and the Oversight Board achieved another milestone in the civil service reform that is such a key element to improve government services and provide government employees with more opportunity. I would also like to congratulate the governor for introducing a new government hiring platform that integrates artificial intelligence and skill-based hiring to transform the recruitment of government employees. This is a new and innovative approach that reforms talent acquisition and management processes to ensure that the government has a modern recruitment system to attract and retain the best people with the right skills. The platform uses artificial intelligence to evaluate applicants and employees' full capabilities rather than just focus on their credentials and hierarchy alone, to broaden the talent pool that's working for the government of Puerto Rico. The government and the Oversight Board have also continued to implement the civil service reform at the Puerto Rico Department of Education. So I'd like to thank the Education Secretary, Yanira Raíces Vega, for her commitment to this important initiative and to help the department's employees to grow their careers and learn through improved training. Improving the public's employees' experience is really one step in a department-wide transformation that will spread from the administration to the classrooms and to students receiving a better education. Meanwhile, the Oversight Board stands fully behind the renewable energy policies of Act 17. It is a pillar of this energy transformation. Another pillar is the independent regulator, the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau, or PREB. The Oversight Board received the governor's submission of Act 10 for review as mandated under PROMESA. Act 10 prevents PREB from evaluating or making any changes to the Commonwealth's current net metering and energy distribution policy, at least until 2031. But Act 17 and the PREPA fiscal plan require that PREB evaluate the program independently this year. And the government, by enacting Act 17, tasked PREB with conducting a study to analyze the benefits associated with the current net metering program. This study would then be subject to public comment, public discussion. Act 10, however, passed without any public hearings, would curtail PREB's independence. And only a regulator free from special interest influence is truly an effective regulator. This was acknowledged by the legislature in the past, and it still should be the policy today. That is why the government must repeal or amend Act 10. Renewable energy, including solar, is in the best public interest, and net metering is an effective way to encourage individual consumers to invest in green energy by making renewable energy more affordable for those benefiting from the program. PREB will decide what policies need to be in place and what rules need to be reviewed to determine the best way to reach our renewable goals in the best interests of all the people of Puerto Rico. If there is a disagreement regarding PREB's policies, there should be space to have a discussion, but we should have that discussion in open based on as much information as possible. Meanwhile, the confirmation hearings for the PREPA Plan of Adjustment have concluded. Years of hard work led us to this crucial point, and I'd like to thank the Oversight Board staff, its legal team, and our experts for the exemplary work to ensure a successful confirmation hearing. And I want to thank you, Professor Skeel, for your testimony and the countless hours that you dedicated to this plan. The plan would reduce more than $10 billion of total claims by almost 80%, to the equivalent of $2.6 billion, excluding the pension liabilities. It would save Puerto Rico about $15 billion in principal and interest payments. For 2 weeks, we presented to the U.S. District Court with a roadmap to end PREPA's bankruptcy and evidence to satisfy the requirements for the court to confirm the plan. Professor Skeel, you described the plan as a breakthrough because it is a key to transform Puerto Rico's system so that it can provide reliable electricity. Bondholders who opposed the plan argued that the court should deny confirmation because PREPA could pay creditors more than what the plan proposes. The objecting bondholders still want at least an additional $4 billion. The Oversight Board does not believe that the bondholders understand the severity of such a large burden on the people of Puerto Rico, and we understand what is at stake. Puerto Rico cannot afford more than what this plan provides. We hope that the court will approve the plan so that PREPA can leave its bankruptcy behind and we can continue the transformation of Puerto Rico's energy system to provide more reliable and cleaner energy. With the conclusion of the confirmation hearings for PREPA and our hope that the plan of adjustment will conclude the period of debt restructuring, the Oversight Board has taken a fresh look at the fiscal plan for Puerto Rico and how we best can complete our work to fulfill all of PROMESA's mandates. It is important to remember that prior to PROMESA, for each of the first 16 years of this century, from 2000 to 2016, government spending exceeded government revenues. Every year, government operated at a deficit. Every year, controls and guardrails, to the extent that they existed, were insufficient to prevent overestimation of revenues, excessive borrowing, overspending, and the deficits that eroded Puerto Rico's economic stability. Before Promesa, government pensions were not sufficiently funding, putting pension payments for current and future retirees at risk. As a result of these practices, the consolidated Commonwealth's outstanding debt and pension liabilities had grown to over $120 billion, with more than $70 billion in financial debt and more than $50 million in pension liabilities. An amount that's almost twice the size of Puerto Rico's economy. Now, Puerto Rico has come a long way. The government of Puerto Rico and the Oversight Board together have made significant progress in achieving fiscal responsibility, stabilizing Puerto Rico's finances, substantially reducing its debt burden, and making significant strides to reform its civil service. Today, Puerto Rico is stable and the Commonwealth government is solvent. Fiscal responsibility, however, is more than completing the debt restructuring and stabilizing the finances for Puerto Rico. The method to achieve fiscal responsibility requires policies and permanent reforms, specific defined practices. It requires discipline and continuity. Restructuring Puerto Rico's debt was the first step in achieving fiscal responsibility. It is not enough to declare the recovery completed. To complete our mandate, sound fiscal management practices must be accepted and implemented over the long term. The new practices must become permanent, not just because the Oversight Board is here, but because that is the way to properly manage the finances of the government. All in all, the government must believe that these reforms are necessary. Puerto Rico must not fall backwards. The stability must turn into recovery. The government will also need to execute targeted investments and implement profound structural reforms to produce sustainable growth, support government revenues, and prevent debt-financed operating expenditures. The fiscal plan we present today defines the path to complete the journey from bankruptcy to prosperity and to reverse the decades of fiscal mismanagement. Only completing this path will lead Puerto Rico to sustainable economic growth and opportunity for the people of Puerto Rico, opportunity right here in Puerto Rico. So today we are also presenting the central government budget for the fiscal year 2025 that we plan to submit to the Legislative Assembly for consideration and vote. The success of the government and the Oversight Board in stabilizing Puerto Rico's budget and the economic growth following COVID-19 pandemic lifted by the stimulus from the federal government will enable the government to increase spending by 3% in the coming fiscal year. The surplus enables us together to invest in the areas where resources are needed most, particularly health, education, but also to strengthen Puerto Rico's foundation to achieve fiscal and financial responsibility and economic growth. The stability that we have achieved together will allow the government to increase spending for the recruitment of additional social workers and technicians, for the elderly program, to continue the civil service reform expansion, to make repairs in public schools, and for the centers for minors and victims of sexual aggression, and for the recruitment of paramedics and dispatchers, amongst others, as proposed by the governor. The Oversight Board agreed to the government's proposal to increase funding for the Department of Education, the Department of Health, and the Puerto Rico Police Department. We hope that the Legislative Assembly will pass for the governor to sign a compliant budget with the fiscal plan as required under Promesa. It is imperative that the two chambers continue to pass compliant budgets and that spending remains within the budget throughout the fiscal year. Only then can the Oversight Board fulfill its statutory mandate under Promesa. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members, and Governor.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you so much for those kind words. Are there any questions or comments on the Executive Director's update before we move to the fiscal plan? So why don't we move to the next order of business, which will consist of presentations of 3 fiscal plans for 2024. We'll start with the 2024 Commonwealth Fiscal Plan, which Robert Mujica will be presenting, and I'll turn the floor back over to you, Robert.
Thank you, Chairman. the proposed Commonwealth fiscal plan for 2024 has changed somewhat from the plans that we've had in the past, in the sense that we are now focused on how do we move past the recovery period. It's important to look backwards to figure out how you want to move forward. In 2018, as part of PROMESA, there was a requirement in the law for the General Accounting Office to issue a report on what were the root causes of the bankruptcy and to make recommendations on how to move forward. That 2018 report is just as relevant today as it was then. It identified 3 root causes of the bankruptcy. The first was inadequate financial management practices. The second was a prolonged economic contraction. And then the third were policy decisions, such as borrowing to fund the balanced budgets and not funding purely the pension funds. These are the things that as we move forward past the bankruptcy, we need to make sure we resolve so that we don't go backwards. We need to establish robust financial management and oversight that is permanent after the board leaves. For economic growth, you had decades of contraction. While we're receiving the federal funds, which are supporting the economy, we need to build underneath that economic growth so that when those funds roll off, it is growing again. So you're not going back to the contraction that existed prior to PROMESA. We are on the way, but we need to move forward. And then the policy decisions, there needs to be a discipline and a recognition by the legislature that policies that cost money, that impact the fiscal plan, actually matter. We're only a year and a half after, almost 2 years out of the bankruptcy from Title III for the Commonwealth. And there's already a return to passing in some of the laws, returning to pension increases and other things that bring us back to what caused the bankruptcy in the first place. So the 2024 fiscal plan is going to highlight the initiatives that we need to address the root causes so that we don't go backwards. Some progress has been made. There is a debt management policy, which includes some controls so that you do not use debt to pay for operating improvements. But there's still this, the constitutional quirk that deals with the issue of whether or not a budget is balanced, right? If you're using any revenues, not just the revenues for that year. PROMESA required that the budgets be balanced according to modified accrual. It is a high standard, but it's an important one. And it's one that was used in New York City post their near bankruptcy and has resulted in New York City being solvent every year since the crisis in the 1970s. Where have we gotten so far? What have we done? Puerto Rico's debt has been reduced dramatically. Prior to the restructuring of the debt, 25 cents of every dollar was being used to pay for debt service. It's an extraordinary amount and was completely unaffordable. The amount that you're spending to pay for debt is money that you're not spending in education. You're not spending in healthcare. You're not spending in all of the other areas, right? And that contributes to the lack of economic growth, because if you can't spend in those areas, Puerto Rico becomes less attractive, and that leads to the migration and the spiral. So where are we today? 25 cents of every dollar has now been reduced to 6 cents of every dollar. That is well within the amount of debt service that other states have, the rest of the nation, and is something that is now affordable. And that allows us now to make the investments that are in the governor's budget and that we're talking about submitting today. It is almost a 60% reduction. But again, that is just part of it, because the debt was a symptom of the broader problem, which is financial mismanagement. Since 2018, the Oversight Board has been actively managing the budgets. But again, it's important to look backwards. For the first 16 years of this century, 2000 to 2016. In each year consecutively, the government spent more than they took in revenues. I mean, it's important to understand that is a structural issue with how the finances are managed, and that led to the amount of debt that we had. We've been working with the government to manage the budgets going forward. And in 22, the Commonwealth came out of bankruptcy. Large payments still had to be made in that year for debt service because while they were in Title III, they couldn't make those payments. It's now important to how do we get to the point out of here so that when the board is gone, we don't go back to those 16 years, right, of revenues being less than how much you are spending. That is the turning point of where we are with this fiscal plan, because hopefully PREPA, a bank, will be out of Title III. That plan will be confirmed. And now we have to figure out how do we make sure that the finances going forward are being managed correctly and we have economic growth so that more revenues are coming in so that you can continue spending more. This budget has a 3% spending increase in it. That is the result of fiscal discipline and the revenues performing better than we had anticipated. It's a dividend, and that dividend is now being used for properly spent in the areas that we think need additional spending. The governor has identified those areas. We agreed with many of those areas, and that is what you'll see in the budget. But we have to remember kind of where we got here, because fundamentally how you manage the budget has to change. The legislature, even after the fiscal year closes on June 30th, begins on July 1, that's the end of that's the budget, and we finish a budget hopefully by June 30th. That's the budget for the year. That's not the practice here. The practice here is budget's done, and then they continue passing bills that spend money, reduce taxes, or do other things that impact the overall financial plan. That means that the budget is not really ever closed. That means that you have this open thing that's happening all the time. The budget should be the budget. And then if you have additional needs that may happen, which could happen, it's a discussion of identifying revenues, not pass it, and we'll figure it out later. Now, after Promesa, as I said, there's been a dividend. So there's been talk in the past about the reductions that have been in the budget. And there was a time where the budgets had to reflect the reality of the amount of revenues. Last year's budget did not have reductions. This year's budget, as I mentioned, doesn't have reductions, it actually has increases. But it also is important to note some of the increases that we have made over the years cumulative, because there have been investments that are made. And that's part of managing the resources properly. $2.5 billion was invested in retirement to make sure that you could actually pay the retirements of the retirees, right? Retirements are promises that you make to the retirees. As a result of the bankruptcy, those promises were not able to be fulfilled. Working with the government, we identified $2.5 billion that are there to make sure that those promises we're committing them for the future. Almost $1 billion in capital expenditures for healthcare facilities. We recognize that more needs to be done in the healthcare space, but let's not forget what has been done. It has not been all right sizing of a budget. Almost $1 billion in salary increases for teachers, for school staff, and the creation of new positions. $740 million for salary increases for the police officers, because the government recognized that it's important. And as a result of the bankruptcy, we couldn't make those kinds of investments. $450 million to invest in broadband and providing technical skills for the workforce in the future. Last year, we increased by 20% the amount available to the University of Puerto Rico. It's not to go back to the old ways. The university still has challenges, But the point was to say, we recognize that we need to invest in the institution. We want that institution to be back to where it once was. But those dollars need to be tied to changes and reforms that reflect the reality and reflect a new economy and how the university can be part of growing Puerto Rico out of post-bankruptcy, out of Title III. The Earned Income Tax Program. It is probably one of the largest tax cuts in the history of Puerto Rico. Next year alone, it will be about $1.3 billion. Since it was enacted, $4.9 billion. It's costing more than we projected it to cost. We only projected it to cost $800 million a year. It is now 1.3. Some could say that's a success. The point is that that money is going to almost 600,000 taxpayers in Puerto Rico. That's money that we collect. It's being returned to the people. It has happened as we've been in Title III and moved out of Title III. We have $730 million in new initiatives for the current year, which is part of the 3% increase, which generally we'll talk about later. Another $300 million in capital investments that are in this budget for next year, that is part of the governor's budget. And as I mentioned earlier, $250 million in tax rebates to go to under 150,000 families. And then as part of civil service reform, we're investing $250 million in the government of the current employees and the future to make sure that we have the right skill sets to manage the government going forward. So in addition, we've made targeted investments, and these investments are for long-term growth. That's what we have done. Here's where we are moving forward. We need to invest in human capital. We recognize that. We need to invest in social welfare, the EITC. There's efforts regarding SNAP and the NAP work requirements here, workforce development programs. As I mentioned, the tax rebate, K-12 education. Puerto Rico receives enormous amount of money from the federal government with regard to K-12 education. Those dollars need to be managed better. We also receive an enormous amount, over $4 billion in one-time funds. Those funds are being used for operating. Those funds are going to go away. And we need to make sure, one, we're planning for it because those are one time. And we still can grow out of it. K-12, we have to recognize that there's a demographic change in the number of students in K-12. So all of these things are part of that conversation, but it doesn't mean that we need to invest necessarily more dollars here, but we need to manage the dollars that we have here and then do an assessment of what more is needed. And as I mentioned, we are actively working with the government, with stakeholders, with the governing board and the administration at UPR to make sure that there's a path forward for additional investment. But those additional investments are put in the right places so that the university is growing again. Sustained fiscal responsibility requires long-lasting financial management practices and sustainable growth. That means that it is not just the board working with the government and then the board working with the legislature and sometimes us saying no. We need to make sure that these practices are permanent. You know, I did this for a long time. I had a lot of rules in place. There are many things that I could and couldn't do when I was managing a budget. Many of those things they prevent irresponsible things from happening. They prevent irresponsible things happening from the executive side. They prevent them from happening from the legislature. Many of those limitations, those guardrails, don't exist. That process needs to be reformed. We need to have a budget reform and processes in place that prevent fiscal mismanagement from happening. There will always be ways to be, irresponsible, but you can put guardrails in place. You can put things in place to make sure that it doesn't happen in a post-board environment. And that is where we are right now. We've been working closely with the executive, working closely with the budget office to put together a plan for administrative changes and looking forward also to potentially legislative changes so that Going forward, it is a different kind of a budget process, one that doesn't allow for unfettered spending, and it doesn't allow for the 16 years that were the beginning of this century. We need to have a capital delivery plan for each agency. This is something that's the best practice. It's the practice in everywhere else. You need a capital plan. You need to know long-term how much you're going to spend. You need to know where those dollars are going to come from. And you need to know how long it is going to take. Puerto Rico is going to have the return to the capital markets. And you're going to need to know how much do you need, when do you need it, and how are you going to pay for it when you need it. Right now, because of the federal reconstruction dollars, most of the money that you would need for the capital from the debt capital markets would be for infrastructure investment. The federal dollars are doing a lot of the infrastructure investment presently. But again, those will wane, but it gives you a great opportunity to lay the foundation for a capital plan. This is the capital plan that we're going to need, because you need capital plans for 20 years out. I used to do capital plans that were, 20 years long. You have to identify the resources, but you know where they are. They can change because things change, but that is the discipline that is fiscal responsibility. And it all needs to be transparent. It all needs to be public. It all needs to be available for everyone to see and open to scrutiny. And that's okay. On the economic growth side, we need a framework for economic growth going forward. A lot has changed. The world has changed. Capital markets have changed. The economies have changed. And there's no economists that have the right answers. And a lot of them will say things are changing, and they're changing very rapidly. Puerto Rico needs to be prepared to deal with those changes and figure out its role, how it best fits into a changing global economy, and how we can progress in the future. And again, we have an extraordinary opportunity to do that while we are using the federal dollars, which are currently running through our economy at $10 billion projected in this year alone. Everyone needs to work together. This is not a partisan issue. This is about how do we grow? How do we create jobs? How do we create an environment where even the people that left want to return to Puerto Rico, because there is opportunity on the island, and you're only going to have it by having jobs and creating growth and long-term growth, or a plan for long-term growth. So, as I mentioned, the budget reform will require, and this will, as we move forward, robust financial management and oversight practices. So revenue forecasting process has to be improved. These are never perfect. You're always going to get it. You're always going to get it wrong. I used to say it's just a matter of, who's less wrong on these things, and they change. But there needs to be an open and transparent process with regards to revenue forecasting, and the previous 16 years that didn't exist. Budget best practices, working with the budget office to figure out what are the best practices, how can we best manage money, how can we follow cash, how do we develop capital plans going forward, how do we manage the education resources, how do we work with labor, how do we negotiate salary increases in a responsible way that fits within the budget and is not based on politics. It has to be based on merits, on skills, and doing forward. And we've been doing that. We're working with the governor right now on civil service reform. That has been happening. But again, the tendency is to roll back. So we have to make sure that it's permanent. Healthcare system is having challenges. There's not a day that's going by that you don't hear about it. We need to just focus on it and make sure that we have the resources to make investments to the extent we need it. And that is the point right now. We're at that point where we do have resources. We have to figure out where it can properly go. Transparency and reporting is something the government is doing now, and we need to do more, and we need to recognize the role of the municipalities and how they can partner with the government on delivering services. So we're going to work on a comprehensive capital program with the governor, multi-year capital plans going forward. This is something that is the next step going forward. And I know that there's a lot of, it's an issue of bandwidth sometimes, because you're also trying to deliver all of the federal reconstruction dollars and get those out as quickly as possible. But we need to make sure that there's something in place for how we plan going forward. This is what, every entity does. Every municipality should be doing this. Every state does this. This is how you can manage going forward and make sure that you're using the capital markets for what you need, and you're instilling confidence in the capital markets that you have a plan and you have the resources to go forward. And the economic growth initiatives, as I mentioned, we need an overall economic growth plan that works underneath the federal dollars that we're spending that right now are contributing and floating the economy going forward. We look forward to working with the administration on this, as we move forward. But the plan overall is right now, the debt restructurings are largely gone, are largely over. Hopefully PREPA gets confirmed. Now we need to make sure that we have the long-term financial best practices in place. Promesa was clear on one thing that ran throughout the statute: fiscal responsibility and long-term fiscal responsibility. And the requirements for the board on having balanced budgets, the requirements from the board on having access to the capital markets, all of those things relate that to the theme of fiscal responsibility. And this fiscal plan is about that going forward. So we look forward, working with the government on making sure that we can achieve all of the things in this fiscal plan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert. Are there any questions or comments about the Commonwealth fiscal plan? I'll just echo what Robert said. This is really a point of transition. Hopefully we're just about done with restructuring. Hopefully the PREPA plan will be confirmed, and we'll be turning in a robust way to targeted investment and trying to continue to ensure long-term fiscal responsibility. And this fiscal plan really does reflect it. It really is a different fiscal plan than the previous fiscal plans. So not seeing any further comments or questions. Can somebody move to certify the 2024 Commonwealth fiscal plan?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval.
Thank you, John. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Betty. Would all in favor please say yes?
Yes.
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 Any opposed, please say no. Any abstentions? So that fiscal plan is certified. And we will turn now to the PRIDCO 2024 fiscal plan. That presentation, I believe, will be made by Ginorli Maldonado, who is our Senior Director of Fiscal Transformation. The floor is yours, Ginorli.
Thank you, David Skill, but actually the presentation will be managed by Paola Rosario. I believe she's with us today. Paola, go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, here. Okay. Thank you, Dino. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. Today we present the 2024 fiscal plan for Rico, which is the Puerto Rico Industrial Development Company, which is jointly certified between Rico and the board. This year's fiscal plan for Rico serves as a model for collaboration between the government and the Oversight Board, as Rico and the board develop the forecast, initiatives, and priorities together. The Oversight Board is very appreciative of Rico's collaboration throughout this year's fiscal plan development process. Over the last few months, the process has included productive joint fiscal plan work sessions, as well as high-quality fiscal plan submissions from Rico, and consistent communication throughout the process to align on fiscal plan assumptions and initiatives that made this joint certification possible. The fiscal plan certification marks the continued success of joint certifications, which began last year when Rico and the Oversight Board jointly certified the fiscal year 24 budget. We also anticipate and hope that the FY25 budget will be jointly certified as well. Fiscal 24 was a pivotal year for Rico. In December 2023, Rico, in collaboration with the FOMB and the Oversight Board, successfully restructured its outstanding revenue bonds and issued a new revenue bond indenture. As a result, this is the first Rico fiscal plan to incorporate new debt service from this completed Title VI debt restructuring. The fiscal plan also includes a series of ambitious reform opportunities to improve collections, invest in Rico's properties, and manage the portfolio through the use of specialized third parties. By acting on all the initiatives mentioned and targets in the fiscal plan, Rico will be able to serve as an investment vehicle for future growth on the island and better serve current tenants. This fiscal plan 30-year forecast results in a total fiscal plan surplus of $33.7 million for the 30-year period ending in fiscal year 54. Please turn to the next slide, please. Rico manages one of the largest portfolios of industrial and commercial use buildings in Puerto Rico, with properties located throughout the island with high concentrations in the east, west, and southern regions. Managing the largest portfolio of industrial real estate on the island presents many challenges. Some of the statistics highlighted in this slide are addressed in this fiscal plan as areas of improvement which Rico is currently working on. Specifically, Rico's average occupancy rate across the portfolio of approximately 67% is lower than current benchmarks, as well as its average annual rent, which is approximately $3.90 per square foot. The average occupancy is targeted to gradually improve to 85% with the hiring of the third-party manager, which is JLLL, which is planned to occur at the beginning of fiscal year 25. As it pertains to Rico's low average rent per square foot, this is a result, among other reasons, of not updating its rental rate card since 2003. However, in fiscal year 24, Rico released an RFP to execute on the rental rate card initiative and selected the proponent. Additionally, Rico has historically underinvested in its capital stock, leading to a significant accrual of deferred capex and the physical deterioration of its properties to a point where some properties are unsafe to enter. This is why Rico and the Oversight Board identified 33 structurally unsafe properties that were marked for demolition. The Oversight approved and included in this fiscal plan a $50 million reserve to address demolition for these properties. In fiscal year 24, Rico started the demolition process with 8 properties and anticipates completing the demolition of all the 33 property population by the end of fiscal year 26. As mentioned previously, fiscal year 24 was a highly productive year for Rico, as management worked closely with the Oversight Board to make progress on a number of initiatives, including successful Title VI restructuring. Rico is in the final stages of negotiations with JLL, who is the selected proponent for the third-party manager, and is expected to begin onboarding by July 1st. This fiscal plan includes fiscal benefits of the third-party manager expected to begin in the second quarter of fiscal year 25. Additionally, as mentioned earlier, Rico issued a rental rate card RFP and selected a firm that will conduct a study of market standards to better align with Rico's rental rates with those across Puerto Rico and comparable markets abroad while maintaining Rico's mission. Finally, this year, Rico also published a public notice announcing the sale of 8 properties via request for purchase offers as part of its efforts to execute on its divestment initiative. In addition, Rico is also considering the release of an RFP to identify a firm to conduct property appraisals to divest non-rentable properties. Proceeds from these potential sales will be an upside to the forecast in this fiscal plan. All of these accomplishments are significant for Rico's continued progress, which will support the financial forecast, operational targets, as well as Rico's mission. This fiscal plan also includes $502 million of fiscal improvements. many of which were introduced or included in prior fiscal plans and align with the surplus adjustments made collaboratively with the government and Rico during last year's revenue bond negotiations. As noted on the far left side of this slide, in fiscal year 24, Rico began paying debt service pertaining to its new indenture. Considering the incremental expenses dispersed for debt service, which was not previously considered, Rico is estimated to end the year 1.9 million ahead of plan, mainly driven by unspent budgeted amounts. After considering payments to bondholders as part of the restructuring process, the extension of budget capex, and FY24 estimated expenses, Rico is anticipated to end the year with an unrestricted cash balance of $15.7 million. This fiscal plan also includes a series of fiscal improvement initiatives. These initiatives include a capex investment of $418 million, which consists of both out-of-pocket expenses and $237 million in FEMA obligated funds. The out-of-pocket expense capex will fund deferred capex needs, a reserve fund, and other specific needs to bring the Rico portfolio closer to market standards. Additionally, the third-party manager is expected to contribute $417 million to the surplus, considering the expected impact of an increase in occupancy, better strategic planning, the improvement of delinquent collections, and the reduction of DDEC and professional services, as the third-party manager will be basically picking up these responsibilities. Finally, operational improvements are anticipated to contribute around $156 million to the surplus due to the inclusion of temporary personnel to be funded through FEMA funds, an incremental reduction of 15% of the DDEC fee, the renewal of expired leases, payroll and pension reductions, as well as escalation and rental rates. In addition to the fiscal drivers, the fiscal plan calls for additional strategic initiatives that require Rico to first transition its accounting and finance system to a real estate specific software system, as well as divest non-rentable properties identified in the divestment study and several other incremental properties Rico identified to have divestment potential. This will allow Rico to manage capex and focus on its leasable assets. Additionally, as mentioned previously, Rico is in the process of updating its current rental rate card, which was last updated in 2003. The updated rental rate card will set the basis for future tenants, better lease renewal terms, and provide incremental revenues to Rico. Finally, Rico is actively working to improve intergovernmental relationships that will leverage Rico to better market its properties it's trying to sell or lease. On this slide, the bridge illustrated walks through the $502 million of anticipated fiscal improvements, which we have previously discussed. On the left-hand side, we can see the initial projection of the 30-year deficit amounts to $460 million, which included debt service for Rico's new indenture. However, the fiscal plan projects a surplus of $33.7 million, considering all of the fiscal improvements we have discussed today. As illustrated, rental escalation increases, onboarding of the third-party manager, and estimated FEMA and out-of-pocket capex needs are forecasted to bring the largest fiscal improvements to Rico across the forecast period. The Oversight Board is extremely appreciative of the collaboration with Rico and AFAF throughout the 2024 Rico fiscal plan process, and we look forward to continue this relationship in the FY25 budget process, as well as further fiscal plans to come. Mr. Chairman, this concludes the presentation of the 2024 Rico fiscal plan.
Thank you, Paula. Are there any questions or comments on the Rico fiscal plan? Not seeing any. Can I have a motion to propose that it be certified?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval.
Thank you, John. We have a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Andrew. Would all in favor please say yes?
Lamper.
Yes.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? So that passes and that fiscal plan is certified. We have one more fiscal plan to take a look at, and that's the 2024 fiscal plan for COFINA. That is going to be presented by Herman Ojeda, who is our Director of Revenues. Herman, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Chair. We now turn our attention to the Puerto Rico Sales Tax Financing Corporation, or COFINA for its acronym in Spanish. COFINA is a public corporation and instrumentality of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico that is an independent and separate legal entity from the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. Slide, please. COFINA receives pledged sales and use tax revenues and makes debt service payments to COFINA bondholders pursuant to its plan of adjustment consummated in February of 2019. Next slide, please. COFINA revenues are defined by the bond indenture, which requires a fixed transfer of sales and use tax collections to COFINA. These sales and use tax proceeds have been collected in the first 4 months of the fiscal year consistently over the last 5 years. This rapid collection period is expected to continue for the foreseeable future. Any excess sales and use tax transfers to COFINA during the fiscal year that is greater than the annual bond payment is returned to the Commonwealth's general fund. COFINA's operating expenses are funded by interest income generated by funds deposited in the COFINA bond trustee accounts held for the benefit of COFINA at Bank of New York Mellon, and if necessary, by prior year surpluses. The 2024 COFINA fiscal plan was jointly developed by the Government of Puerto Rico and the Oversight Board pursuant to PROMESA Section 201F and meets applicable requirements of Section 201B of PROMESA, which defines the requirements to certify a fiscal plan. This fiscal plan continues to ensure long-term sustainability and promotes fiscal responsibility. This concludes my presentation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Herman. Are there any questions or comments about the COFINA fiscal plan? Seeing none, is there a motion to certify the fiscal plan?
I move to certify the fiscal plan.
Thank you, Andrew. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, John. Would all in favor please say yes?
Yes.
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 Any opposed, please say no. Any abstentions? So that motion passes and that fiscal plan is certified as well. We now turn from fiscal plans to the Commonwealth budget, and I believe Denorly Maldonado is going to present the budget. You have a "I'm going to present" look on your face, so I'll turn the floor over to you, Denorly.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, board members, Governor Pierluisi, Executive Director, and to those listening via webcam. If you go to the next slide, please. The proposed fiscal year 2025 general fund budget is 3% higher than the fiscal year 2024 general fund certified budget. This $13.1 billion budget prioritizes strategic initiatives to support strong financial management and oversight, as well as economic growth. The budget includes investments to support critical initiatives, such as civil service reform, funding for the 2024 general elections, upgrades to physical and digital infrastructure, and funding to support key services that were previously funded with one-time federal funds, which are expiring. In addition, funding has been enhanced for social programs that support the aging population, mental health, and early childhood. The collaborative efforts between the government and the Oversight Board highlight a commitment to fiscal responsibility and transparency, and to build confidence amongst stakeholders and residents. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. Over 62% of the general fund budget, as you can see in the middle donut, is allocated towards critical services, including education, public safety, and health, and to support retirees. The majority of education funding is allocated towards operating educational programs, maintaining school facilities to support the development of our future talent. Public safety funding supports the police, fire department, emergency medical services to protect the residents of Puerto Rico. And retiree-related expenses support pension payments for current retirees, as well as sets aside funding today to secure payments for retirees in the future. When it comes to total state funds, which include both the general fund and the special revenue funds, the total proposed budget for fiscal year 2025 is almost $18 billion. Total state funds allocate funding similarly to the general fund for purposes such as education, public safety, and health. In addition, funding is allocated towards gaming, insurance, public works, and tourism from revenues generated by those services. Although the special revenue funds do not require annual legislative action and are therefore not included in today's proposed submission to the executive and the legislature, they complement the general fund resources. Accounting for the special revenue funds provides a full view of the resources available to the Commonwealth for providing essential services and funding the initiatives that are part of the 2024 fiscal plan for Puerto Rico. The total central government budget inclusive of federal funds for fiscal year 2025 is $33 billion. This represents one of the largest budgets in Puerto Rico's history. It reflects the influx of billions of federal fund dollars to support housing, nutrition, and essential healthcare needs of residents on the island, in addition to key services previously mentioned. Next slide, please. Thank you. The fiscal year 2025 proposed budget includes over $700 million of investments that will benefit the residents of Puerto Rico. These investments include over $300 million towards education to support staffing, student transportation, school maintenance, decentralization of operations, and special education programs. $170 million to support health and social well-being, to assist aging and homeless adults, mental health and intellectual disabilities programs, future doctors, and to provide resources for minors victim center rebuilds. Almost $90 million for infrastructure investments and transportation, water quality and flood control, planning and zoning, territorial plans, and grid resilience. Over $70 million of funding available for municipality investments to support essential services and municipal services reform. $40 million towards public safety to hire additional police and firefighter cadets, equipment, facilities maintenance, and technology investments. And finally, almost $40 million to support the 2024 general election cycle for key aspects, including operations, materials, supplies, and additional staffing needs. Next slide. In addition to investing in critical services, there is over $300 million dedicated towards capital investments. Several projects have already been identified, with almost 90% of the funding having been allocated towards those needs. While half of the capital expenditure budgets in the general fund has been allocated towards construction and infrastructure projects, the remaining has been allocated towards enhancements that will improve technology that supports reporting and digitization, equipment in medical facilities, vehicles and transportation, including road repairs, and with a small portion remaining to be allocated for capital needs that will be identified during the year. In conclusion, The proposed 2025 budget intended for submission to the legislature provides the resources for the government to provide necessary services and carry out the initiatives that outlined in the 24 fiscal plan for Puerto Rico. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my presentation, unless there are any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janorli. Are there any questions about the Commonwealth budget or comments? Looks like the governor has a question or a comment.
No, I'll simply say, Mr. Chairman, that I didn't know and my team didn't know that there would be this presentation on the budget at this meeting. So in due course, I might comment on it. I'm not in a position to comment at this hearing because I just saw your final call. I know that the executive director of our OMB at the Puerto Rico government level has been engaging with the board staff on this topic, but we didn't have this final presentation or final call until just now. So I simply reserve my rights to comment about it, either in writing or publicly.
Absolutely, and you'll have also an opportunity to make a decision about it as well when it's submitted of what your what the government's stance will be. Any other questions or comments? Can I have a motion to approve the budget and for us to be able to submit it to the governor and to the legislature?
Mr. Chair, I would like to move to approve the fiscal year 2025 Commonwealth budget developed by the Oversight Board and its submission to the governor and the legislature.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Betty. Would all in favor please say yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, please say no. Any abstentions? So that motion passes, and we will submit the budget to the governor and to the legislature. And now I will turn the floor back to the governor, who will be making some comments. So the floor is yours, Governor Pierluisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today, I would like to focus my remarks on two important topics: the certification of the 2024 fiscal plan for the government of Puerto Rico and the requirements for the phase-out of the Oversight Board under PROMESA. Let me begin with the fiscal plan. The government submitted its revised 2024 fiscal plan, The Path to Prosperity, on December 22nd of last year. Our submission included a series of important initiatives, and I am glad to see that in many areas, we're closer to agreement than in prior years. The certified fiscal plan includes projected expenditures for the general fund for fiscal years 2024 and 2025 that represent the largest budgets in our history, due in large part to Puerto Rico's economic development and growth during the past 4 years. Our plan projected government surpluses until fiscal year 2049, based on macroeconomic forecasts for the island. The certified fiscal plan, however, projects smaller aggregate surpluses due in part to the board's assumption of a Medicaid cliff in fiscal year 2028, in which federal contributions to Puerto Rico's Medicaid costs dramatically drop to a statutory level, which has historically never happened. I am pleased that vital government initiatives in the government's submission are included in the certified fiscal plan, including Medicaid expansion up to 100% of federal poverty level, continuing Medicaid wraparound Latino support, continuing the Essential Services Fund for municipalities subject to certain preconditions, funding recent salary increases granted to teachers, firefighters, and other first responders after the expiration of temporary federal funding sources, and the $250 million tax rebate program, which we expect to repeat in the upcoming fiscal year. Now, I would like to address Section 209 of PROMESA, which establishes the requirements for termination of the Oversight Board. Congress's stated goal for PROMESA and the Oversight Board's mandate is to help Puerto Rico achieve fiscal responsibility and access to the capital markets. Having said that, the fiscal plan should not foster a process to micromanage the government and its public corporations, which could result in perpetuating the Oversight Board's existence. Given the implementation of the government's plan of adjustment and the other completed debt restructurings, I strongly believe that as a fiscally responsible measure, the Oversight Board must take measurable steps to reduce the bureaucratic costs associated with its policies and procedures. While I recognize that PROMESA has provided useful accountability and transparency guardrails for Puerto Rico, its implementation has been and continues to be extremely costly and has created a parallel bureaucracy that does not help position our economy in a more competitive light. For example, I view as a critical step to begin eliminating the covered territorial instrumentality designation under PROMESA Section 101 D2 for entities that have achieved a sustainable level of debt, a track record of financial performance, and are up to date on the issuance of their audited financial statements. With regard to the specific requirements established in Section 209 of PROMESA, the members of the Oversight Board must act responsibly to ensure that their presence is not overstayed and that public funds are used where they are most needed. The newly certified fiscal plan includes details regarding the requirements and conditions the Oversight Board has stated are necessary for its termination. Since we just received the advanced draft of the fiscal plan a little over a day ago, I've instructed my team to carefully analyze the language, and I will reserve the right of the government to challenge any certification requirements that we believe are unreasonable or go beyond the Oversight Board's purview. Let me provide some specific thoughts based on our limited review of the draft. With respect to achieving 4 consecutive budgets developed by the government in accordance with the modified accrual accounting standards, from my point of view, we are on track to achieve 4 balanced budgets by the end of fiscal year 2025. This will be made clear with the upcoming audited financial statements. On achieving access to the capital markets at reasonable rates, I am deeply concerned with the requirements that have been included in the certified fiscal plan, as they appear to be an overreach by the Oversight Board. As an example, the board indicates that it will evaluate the government's ability to achieve relevant investment-grade credit rating metrics and/or the ability to achieve and maintain an investment-grade credit rating on its debts. This statement seems to call for the government to achieve investment-grade ratings for it to be able to demonstrate market access. In my view, this is far more than PROMESA requires and could result in the Oversight Board's existence far longer than reasonably required, at the expense of the people of Puerto Rico. There is simply no basis or justification for the board to arbitrarily establish requirements that go beyond the language of PROMESA and also seem to be at odds with the views of the markets. I also question the board's reliance on and reference in the certified fiscal plan to metrics and criteria from only one of the nationally recognized rating agencies. The concept of market access at reasonable rates is highly subjective, as it doesn't establish specific numbers, benchmarks, thresholds, or metrics of any kind. I am a strong believer in the free markets, and that the only determinant of market access at reasonable rates should be the markets themselves. The markets determine how much an issuer will have to pay in interest rates and how much it'll be allowed to borrow. I say, we let the markets do the talking. I urge the members of the board to approach the matter of its phase out with PROMESA's goal at the forefront, And considering that every dollar that is spent in overlapping efforts is a dollar that doesn't go to provide services to our citizens, specifically to improve our power, water, transportation, education, public safety, and public health infrastructure and services. I want to be clear. PROMESA and the Oversight Board have served the purpose of allowing Puerto Rico to right-size its balance sheet and achieve a sustainable level of debt. However, I know for a fact, because I was a member of Congress at the time, that the intention behind PROMESA was not to establish an oversight board that would become a parallel government that could overstay its presence. PROMESA gave us a generational opportunity to right some wrongs, and we've taken advantage of that opportunity, having established the necessary guardrails to avoid the government's insolvency, regaining market trust, and making our economy stronger. I reiterate my commitment to continue working collaboratively with the board for the benefit of the people of Puerto Rico. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Governor Pierluisi. Does anybody have any comments or thoughts before we shift to public comments? All right, I think we have now some time to reply to public comments that we've received, and Sylvette Santiago, I believe, is going to read the questions and manage the discussion. So I'll turn it over to you, Sylvette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, board members and Governor. We have received a couple of questions of public commentary, as you mentioned, and I'm going to read some of them. Regarding net metering, we have received questions and concerns about the Oversight Board position on Act 10 and why is the Oversight Board threatening net metering and why the Oversight Board is against renewable energy. Mr. Executive Director, can you explain or elaborate more on this?
Thank you, Sylvester. A little bit of a loaded question. The board, to start with, Act 17. The board supports Act 17 and the goals to 100% renewable energy. In fact, we're actually defending that position in the Title III court with regard to PREPA. Right? One of the issues of debate is the bondholders actually don't think that you can achieve the requirements of the goals of Act 17. And the Oversight Board is actually defending the position that you can and you will. And we believe that, however, it needs to be done smartly. It needs to be done based on facts and data. And the government was very smart in giving additional authority to PREB, the independent regulator, to evaluate energy policies based on facts, based on data, based on where we are. What Act 10 actually does is tries to take power away from the independent regulator. It's not about whether or not net metering continues. In fact, the board believes that net metering is an important tool to make solar and renewable energy more accessible and more affordable. It's a tool that has been working. And what was in the law was to say after 5 years, let PREB make the evaluation and make a determination on how to move forward. That's what should happen. That's what an independent regulator is for. Look at it, make a determination on the policies. Let's have an open discussion. Let them do the report that the statute said they would do. And then let's base, and PREB, who is not appointed by the Oversight Board, appointed by the government, make a decision with regard what to do going forward. And that's where we are. We're not taking a position with regarding net metering. In fact, net metering actually stays in place for all of the rooftop solar installations that currently exist, over 120,000 homeowners, no matter what PREB decides, because they're protected on the law, they're protected on the contracts for 20 years. So it's a false narrative that we're against actually net metering. In fact, we defend Act 17. We believe in the goal of the 100% renewable. We need to get there smartly. We need to make PREB do the study. And the more facts, the more data we have, then let's have an open, public, transparent discussion about the best ways to move forward. But from the board is not taking a position with regard to net metering. Our position is based on allowing PREB to do its job and allowing PREB to make its recommendation as we move forward.
Thank you, Robert. Other question that we have is regarding State Election Commission. The concern is of the people that the Oversight Board needs to assign more budget to the State Election Commission for the next elections that are coming on November.
We increased this year's budget, increased funding for the State Elections Commission. We've heard that there's another request coming in to the board. We have not received anything yet. We will evaluate that and have conversations with the Election Commission, right, going forward as to what the resources are. And we believe that the Election Commission should be funded properly, and resources should not be a reason, right, for any deficiencies. But there's an issue with management, right? There's an issue with resources. So we have a significant increase here over what was available in 2020, right? So there was a significant increase already available to them. To the extent that they're looking for additional resources, we'll evaluate that when we receive a request, and we'll meet with the commission and go over what their needs are.
Thank you, Robert. No more questions.
Thank you, Sylvette. And I'd like to thank Robert and our staff and the other board members and Governor Pierluisi and his administration and everybody who has joined us online today. As I mentioned at the outset, any additional questions that we get, we'll handle through the board's website. Are there any other issues that we should consider before we move to adjourn? So I will move for us to adjourn. Will somebody second that motion?
Second.
I'm not sure who was first, but somebody seconded. Would all in favor please say yes?
Yes.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? So we will adjourn in just a second. Before we adjourn, I'll mention that as usual, we'll have a press conference, which will start in the next few minutes after we close this meeting. So thanks again to everybody, and the meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.